Hello and welcome to the Pursuit of Love podcast. We are thrilled to have you here with us today. My name is Mark Etchison and I am a disciple of Jesus Christ. As Jesus' disciple, I am learning to live every moment of my life in God's presence and His power. And I'm learning to love the way that Jesus loves. I'm not there yet, not by a long shot, but I am on the journey. And the purpose of this podcast is to invite you onto this journey as well. We call the journey the pursuit of love because, first of all, it's something that we have to pursue. I think it's safe to say that none of us have fully arrived. So whether this is your first introduction to the way of Jesus, or if you're a lifelong student of His, or maybe you fall somewhere in between, the invitation is the same. You can live this day as a disciple of Jesus and allow Him to take you more fully into the life that He's called us to, a life of confidence and of goodness and of beauty and of power in the presence of God. But it's also called the pursuit of love because love is central to everything in the Christian life. The reason that is because God is love. So first off, we receive love from God. And as we learn to live in that love transforms us and we begin to love like Jesus. And then we're enabled to share that love with a world that so desperately needs it. Every episode that we provide is specifically designed to help you to see this life a little more clearly and perhaps give you some guidance on how to enter it a little more deeply. At the end of each episode, we'll share with you a way that you can connect with us if you would like us to walk alongside you in this journey. I'd like to say one more thing. The content that we provide here will always be free of charge. We live by the saying of Jesus when He told us, freely we have received, freely give. There will be opportunities to give, and we'll highlight those from time to time, but there will never be any obligation to give. If you ever support us financially, it'll be because you have freely chosen to. So now that you know who we are, I'd like to say once again, thank you for joining us, and I pray that this episode is a blessing to you. Okay, so this is the very first episode of the Pursuit of Love podcast, and I'm super excited about doing this. I thought that since this was the first episode, that maybe we would take time to just talk about the purpose of it. Why are we doing the Pursuit of Love? Why am I putting so much time into recording and editing and putting out episodes, writing emails every day? What is the point of this ministry? Really, what's the point of doing ministry in the first place? So today, that's what I want to talk about. And I'm going to be real personal today. I won't always be this personal, but yesterday as I was getting ready to set everything up to record, and I was sending an email out to all of the folks who are on my email list to let them know that we're starting this new thing today. As I was preparing that, I wanted to write in the email, why do it in the first place? What was the point? And I realized it was more than just what I could say in an email. And so it hit me that maybe it'd be good to just take the first episode and talk about my purpose in doing this. And I'm going to go a good ways back and talk about why I'm in ministry at all. What's the point? I didn't set out to be a minister. I didn't set out to be a pastor. So what was it that led me down this road? And I think if we can understand that, if I can help you understand that, you'll understand the purpose of this podcast. And I also think it's incredibly relevant for the world that we live in today. If you're joining us today on January 11th, 2021, you know what's going on in the world. If you found this later, I don't know how much later maybe you would come across this, but right now we're in the midst of a transition election. A transition of power because we just had an election from one president to the next. Some people are really angry about that. A lot of the people that are angry believe that there was fraud in the election. And then there's a whole another group of people that are really excited about this transition and think it's crazy that some people think there's fraud. And you'll be relieved to know that I'm not going to give my opinion on any of that. I don't even have an opinion on any of it because it seems like there's so much misinformation out there. And that's one of the things that really disheartens me, because as I look at this and I look at the world and I look at the shape that we're in and the ways things are moving, sometimes it feels hopeless. And then when I look at Jesus's people and they're acting as bad or worse as the people in the world, in the political arenas and all these other places, then it really could make me disheartened. But then I remember that the church is actually God's. That Jesus said that not even the gates of hell would prevail against his church. And when I remember that, then I'm filled with hope and I'm filled with confidence that all is going to be well, not just for me, but for the world. John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son." When I was younger, we used to sing a song, Jesus is the Answer, Michael W. Smith song. Jesus is the answer for the world today. And I still believe that's true. But not just in the sense that he will forgive us of our sins and then we can go to heaven to escape the world. But I believe that God sent Jesus because he so loved the world. He wanted to rescue it from the plight that we're in, that's caused by what we call the fall, that's caused by this system of sin that has overtaken the world and that exists in our governmental systems and our political systems, our financial systems, even our religious systems are not exempt from this, even our Christian religious systems. And so I believe that Jesus is completely relevant to our situation now. But only if we live as disciples of Jesus. I'll reiterate this over and over throughout this podcast, but the purpose of this podcast is to help you to live each day of your life as a disciple of Jesus. And as a disciple of Jesus, you are living in the presence and in the power of God, and you're being transformed by his love. And that's what the world needs. The world needs people, you and me, in all of the spaces of life, in the financial corners, in the political corners, in the recreations, and the families, and all the different spaces that we find ourselves. The world desperately needs people who are alive in the presence of God, who are empowered by him to accomplish the good that we feel the need to accomplish, and who are so filled with his love that that good is our purpose. And we won't be derailed by any outside forces or any inward desires or movements that would pull us away from that. That's what we're moving towards. And I realized a long time ago that that's exactly what the world needs. So enough about today's situation. I'm going to take you back. I grew up in a wonderful church. I had a wonderful pastor who, I didn't agree with him then on everything theologically. I don't agree with him now on everything theologically. He has gone on to be with Jesus. He's in heaven. And so his theology is right now. Mine's still a work in progress. But he was just a man that loved Jesus. I heard D.L. Moody say one time, well, I didn't hear him say it, but I read where he said that a man should not preach on hell unless he does it with tears in his eyes. And that was my preacher, Preacher Smith. And Preacher just absolutely loved people. And he loved God, and he wanted to minister with God. And just the goodness of God often would just ooze out of him. When you got close, it was like the aroma of the Holy of Holies when you were around him often. And Preacher, he made me love Jesus. I just really wanted to love Jesus. I wanted to know Jesus the way he did. And so my childhood I spent not even close to perfect. I won't bore you with all the details of everything wrong with me. But I loved Jesus, and I wanted his way. And I remember as a kid, and at the risk of sounding like I'm trying to lift myself up, I'm just going to tell the story as it is, and I hope you'll receive it that way and find goodness in it. But as a kid, I remember lying in the bed and praying that the Lord would just help me to love other people. I mean, I was really little, and I just prayed that the Lord would help me to love other people. And then the way I said it as a kid, and help me to love you million times more than that. And I would pray that prayer often, every night, for many, many years. And I believe that God answered that prayer largely. As I became a young adult, 17, 18, 19 years old, still far from perfect, but I really loved Jesus. And I started feeling this deep compassion for people. I remember one time riding in the car with some folks from my church and looking out at the people. We were at a ball game. We were at a baseball tournament. And there were lots of people around, and nothing bad was going on. But I just remember looking out the window and feeling this deep ache for the people that were out there. And I even said to the people I was in the car with, do you ever just get overwhelmed with compassion for people when you see them? And they kind of looked at me like my head was on backwards. But that was just the way it hit me. I was probably 18, 19 years old. And I didn't really know what to do with this. Many people told me growing up that I was going to be a preacher. I didn't want to be a preacher. I wanted to be a singer. Loved to sing, and thought that I'd be a professional Christian singer, contemporary Christian music. The next Michael English. I didn't have that kind of talent, obviously, but that wasn't the Lord's path for me at any rate. But I still didn't want to be a preacher. I went to college. I only went to a semester of college. I was going to be an accountant. I'm very grateful that I didn't follow that path and ended up where I am. I think I'd be miserable as an accountant. No offense to accountants out there. If that's what you're suited to, that's awesome. I just don't think it would be the life for me. But still, even in college, I was feeling this impression of compassion for people, and I wanted to help people. I came back from college after a semester, and I was living here in my hometown, still going to my church. I was there every time the doors were open. I started leading the worship, being the song leader there at the church. And I just would see people over and over again. And I was in a Pentecostal church. And one thing I love about the Pentecostal church, I love lots about the Pentecostal church. But one thing I really love about the Pentecostal church is they believe in a real connection with God. And I would see people come up as I was leading worship up on the stage. I would see people come up to the altar while we were singing, or at the end of the service while we were singing. And they would just pour their hearts out to God, and they would have this experience with God. But I knew these folks, and it wouldn't be long that they would be right back in to the harmful patterns of living that had led them to the altar in the first place. And I don't mean this critically at all. That's just the way things were. And so with the compassion that I had, I knew that Jesus was the answer. But what I was starting to realize, and at the risk of sounding blasphemous, I'm just going to throw it out there and say it as it is. What I was starting to realize was that getting people saved, the way we think about that in the church, didn't do people a whole lot of good. I know that sounds bad, but please hear me out. Getting people saved wasn't doing them a whole lot of good. We were getting people ready to die. And that's often how we would present it, right? If you were to die tonight, where would you be? But we weren't getting people ready to live. And I didn't understand how that worked. I knew that Jesus was the answer. Instinctively, I knew that. And I was just crazy about Jesus. And I knew he had the answer. But I knew that I wasn't living what would be considered an abundant life. And I was seeing everybody out there, they weren't either. And so many people that really they were really sincere about Jesus. They were just locked in these patterns of destructive living that they just couldn't step out of. It didn't make sense to me because I knew that Jesus was the answer and I couldn't figure out what it was that we were missing. And so I kept digging. I started getting books. By this time, Amy and I, my wife, we've been married going on 22 years this April. But by this time we were dating. And while we were dating, the Christmas that we began dating, she bought me a book called The Pursuit of God by A.W. Tozer. And that book, I still can't walk by that book without feeling like I'm in the Holy of Holies. If I see that book, it just makes me feel like that's where I am. My preacher led me into the Holy of Holies. That book led me into the Holy of Holies. I had a really good experience there. But I began to dig into that book and I realized that there was a deeper life that even as a Pentecostal that I was missing. And I became convinced that what everyday Christians or everyday people were missing, that this was the answer. And so A.W. Tozer named all these other authors that I'd never heard of. And so I started grabbing book after book after book and digging into these books to try to see what exactly it was that we were missing. What can we do? Because at this time, the compassion that I was talking about, it's actually getting more intense. I remember early in mine and Amy's marriage, that after that Christmas, we got married that April, okay? And so from April to October, we lived in a little duplex in our hometown. And so I know it was in that stretch. So it was about the time I was really starting to dig into these books, but the compassion was getting intense. And we would go out to eat somewhere or wherever we would be. And often I would ruin the evening because I would see somebody and something in their face or something in, I don't know. I can't explain it. There's no making sense of it. But I would just start to feel this deep compassion. And it would depress me in a sense. I would just feel so sorry for the people around me. And usually it was specified to one person, or it was brought on by one person. And then I knew people that were dying of cancer. I knew that Jesus was the answer for that. I knew people were lonely, and I knew that Jesus was the answer for that. I knew people that were going through divorces and split ups of marriages, and I knew that Jesus was the answer for that. And I knew that people were hurt so deeply by parents or by their children, and I knew that Jesus was the answer for that. But I just didn't know how to get that answer to them. So I was digging into these books, but the feelings are getting more intense. There was one day that we had gone to McDonald's, and I can still see the young man's face, and it's been over 2 decades now. But he was waiting on us at the he was taking our order at McDonald's, and he didn't say anything. He didn't look depressed. I don't know what it was, but for some reason my heart went out to him deeply. So much so that the next day I couldn't get his face out of my mind. And I just laid on the floor of our duplex with Amy trying to console me, and I just sobbed uncontrollably. I just couldn't quit sobbing. It didn't make sense. But I knew instinctively that there was something deep going on. That getting people saved wasn't helping. And that even, I'd helped some with a homeless ministry and help people get fed because I thought that would help. But I realized that it was even deeper than that. That people that were very well off financially, and for all practical purposes on the outside, everything looked fine. There was something in me that reached into the depths of who they were, and I felt deep compassion for them. And I realized that just getting people enough money, or getting people enough food, or getting people in the church, it wasn't hitting that deep, whatever it was, that deep soul need that somehow I was able to connect with, that they had. And that having the right job, or having the right family, or having the right church, it didn't meet it. And somehow God gave me the ability to see that in other people where that was lacking. And I broke for them. I hurt so deeply for them. And so I kept digging. I just kept digging. And Amy used to tease me. She would say, "You're looking for the book to end all books." And then one day I was at an adult Bible school. And understand, I'm still not thinking about being a preacher. But I was at an adult Bible school. This is a very interesting situation. My Lutheran friend had invited me, a Pentecostal, to an adult Bible school at a Baptist church. So my Lutheran friend took this Pentecostal to a Baptist church. Sounds like the beginning of a bad joke. But it was the beginning of something. While I was there was a man speaking. He was teaching, the pastor of the church. Doug Baltziger is his name. He was teaching the class, and he was just asking questions. He asked one particular question. And the funny thing was, it was from the book of Acts. And he asked a question about it, trying to get some response. And I had just been looking at that same scripture the day before. Because remember, I'm digging deep, man. I'm not reading the Bible as part of my 15-minute devotion in the morning. I'm convinced that in those scriptures, there's something to meet this deep need. And I am pouring through it like a madman, and pouring through all these books like a madman. And there's something deep going on. And so when he asked the question, I just answered it out of, the things that I'd been thinking about and learning. And I didn't think anything of it. I just answered the question. And the pastor, whom I'd never met, he's had his glasses on. He takes off his glasses and he sits them on the podium. And he just lays his head over on the podium and begins sobbing loudly for a couple of minutes. It was very uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable for me. I'm looking around at the people at his church, and they're looking at me like, "What did you do to our pastor?" I'm there with my buddy. He's looking at me like, I don't have any answers for this. And so finally he composes himself. And he said, "I'm sorry, but I've just never heard somebody talk about the scriptures like that." And once again, this is not about me. This is not about patting myself on the back or saying anything great about me. Because I know all I did was say something. There was nothing. You're listening to me now. There's nothing special about the way that I talk. I am not polished. I've probably said 45 times in the last 15 minutes. I'm not a great speaker. But I recognized that what was going out of me to those people, what I was feeling in the depths of their souls, that when I spoke about the scriptures, that came from the same place. And it's not a place, it is a place deep within me, but it doesn't originate in me. Because there's no way my words would have had the effect on this man that it did. It was only the presence of God. His response to my words was the same response I was having to the people around me. And it was then that I recognized that God was calling me to speak to these deep needs in human life, not on my own, not by any stretch. Listen, if I thought that it was going to take Mark Etchison being good enough to do this, then I would never be in front of this camera today. I'd never be talking to you guys. I'd never be starting a podcast. about God and his ways, because I am as inadequate as they come. And I don't say that out of some kind of false modesty where I'm trying to appear humble. I just know it to be true. I know my inadequacies far better than any of you ever will. But I knew at that moment that God had called me to speak to that need. Somewhere around that same time, I was reading The Pilgrim's Progress by, I was going to say Paul Bunyan, but he's the one with the blue ox. It was John Bunyan. And he has in that book, a line where there's a man, it's all metaphor, and there's a man who's seeing all these different images. And in one image, he saw somebody, and he was asking his guide what it meant. And he said, the man whose picture you see, he's one of 1,000. And he says a few things about him, but then there was a line at the end. It says his job is to know and unfold dark things, mysterious things to sinners. And I felt the Lord say to me, that's you. And when I mean sinners, I mean me too. I mean, I am sinner saved by grace, but there's still a lot in me that needs to be transformed. So I tell you those stories to say that I've really dedicated my whole life to knowing Jesus. Almost my whole life. I've been derailed by my own selfishness and sinfulness in more ways than I can count. But I believe that God has called me to speak to you, to help you to see those places in you that need healing. You know, I'm not a counselor. I can't talk you through the hurts of your childhood or how to deal with your spouse better. But what I can do is help you to see the way of Jesus in the midst of wherever you are. That's what this podcast is about. I want you to see that the way of Jesus speaks to every broken place in us. Every single one. And his way is relevant to whatever it is that you're going through. His way is relevant to every ambition, everything in you that is reaching out for something. Every place in you that has been broken, that has been hurt, that has been spat upon and walked over. His presence, his heart, his truth, his life, his way is all that you need for the healing and for the life that you're looking for. You want to know why I'm doing this podcast? You want to know why I take the time to write and to connect with people in these ways concerning Jesus and his way? It's not because I think I'm good at it, because I can assure you I don't. But it's because I saw a long time ago that God is moving with me, countless other people, not just me. But God is moving with me to help people to see how incredibly relevant he is to their life, right where they are. That they don't have to move, that there's nothing special they have to do to find this. All they have to do is step in to his life. And I will pour myself out to help you to live into that. That's why I'm here. That's why I do this. And I want you to know that I'm always here. You can reach out to me at the end of the podcast. I'll give some ways that you can connect with us. And if you reach out to me, I'll respond. I just want us to find that life. Listen, this world, this country would be healed not based upon who gets in the White House at the right time, but this country will be healed when the people of Christ become his disciples and learn how to live each day as his disciples, where they're growing into a life in which every moment is lived in the presence and power of God in everything they do in word or deed flows from his love. That's what the world needs. And that's what I'm here for, to do my small part in that, completely in reliance upon God. Won't you pray with me? Dearest Father, I'm so grateful that you've called us into this life. I pray for every person that is listening right now, that you will open up their hearts to hear what your Spirit is saying to them in those deep places in their souls. And that you will give us the wisdom, the understanding, and the courage to step into the way you've called us to find your life. We ask it in Christ's name. Amen. Well, that concludes today's episode of the Pursuit of Love podcast. We are thrilled and so honored that you took time out of your day to be with us. So we'd like to say thank you. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe to us, whether you're watching us on YouTube or whether you're listening to us on your favorite podcast app. You can hit that subscribe button, and that way you will be alerted to any time that we put any new episodes or any new material out. That'll be delivered straight to you. Also, if you haven't done so already, if you'd go over to thepursuitoflove.org, there you can sign up for our email list. Our email list, I send out an email every day that pertains to the podcast. On Monday, it'll be a description of that week's episode, along with some links through which you can connect to the podcast. And then on Tuesday through Sunday, I will send out just a short email that has some inspiration or some guidance into how to go deeper into the teaching for that week. So we'd love for you to connect with us that way. And if you think that this episode maybe in some way could help someone, or you'd like to put it out there, if you would share it there through YouTube or through your podcast app, out on social media, or send it directly to someone that you think might benefit from it, we'd be honored if you would do that as well. So I hope to see you again next week. But in the meantime, my prayer for you is that you would live each day in the greatest opportunity of life, that you would live each day as a disciple of Jesus Christ, learning from him how to live in the presence and the power and the love of God. Thank you so much. God bless.